Select character screen. Press X to continue. Connection failed. Login malfunction. Please try again soon. Press B to close. Connection failed. Login malfunction. Please try again soon. Press B to close. Select character screen. Press X to select Kaito Onigiri. Events screen. Press B to exit. Select character screen. Press X to select Ryujin Kusanagi. Text chat with other players, press left on the directional pad to open chat. Type message then press X to send chat. For proximity voice chat with other players, press and hold left on the directional pad while speaking. Lifering 6 minutes. Zero says, X Shoties. Ballblade says, is there a gold cap? Ilust Hex says, LF21 tank /killer, but 2 savage divide. Elverus says, WTS last boss Gorgon DM. Ashley says, X. Lily Phillips says, says, X Lifering. Raider says, X Lifering. WTS schematic, Gorgonite boots. Felderus says, last boss Gorgon. Says, WTS Worm DM for info. Yagamai97 says, X and Zero says, X seconds. Yagamai97 says, X any. POD Platinum says, X. Boney Don says, X Worm. Honda Robot says, Lifering 2 minutes 18/20. Oros says, so X Worm Pug. Vistan C says, X Worm. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 7 DPS link all. Lil Bubsis says, X. 77751 says, WTS schematic, Gorgonite boots 35k. Onidon says, X Worm. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 7 DPS link all. Meet Me Daddies says, break one down. Lipshit says, LFM life taker. Antalila says, X Lifering. Z and K21 says, all grog is bait. Tenahan says, grog LFM2 heal 7 DPS link all. Says, X-Human 6/20ths. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 6 DPS link all. Chi Iavine says, X Tempest Fury. USPS delivery man says, anyone wanna do M1BNB? USPS delivery man says, need BDP. X sorry says, LFM boldcaster/life taker. Scatters says, STT, this is we smelting. Tenahan says, Grog LFM 2 wheel 5 DPS link all. Tenahan says, Grog LFM 2 wheel 5 DPS link all. Oros says, X worm. Pug. Chi Line says, anyone need to get Tempest Fury? X sorry says, LFM boldcaster/life taker. ZNK21 says, X worm. Scatters says, STT, Tina check out okay. USPS delivery man says, LF3 DPS for M1BNB. Oros says, X worm pug. Kali says, schematic, Orgonite breastplate WTS. Scatters says, STT, furniture. Scatters says, STT, furniture. Kali says, schematic, Orgonite breastplate WTS 12K. Kali says, schematic, Orgonite breastplate WTS 12K. Scatters says, STT, so then. Tenahan says, Grog LFM 2 heal 4 DPS link all. X sorry says, LFM boldcaster/life taker. Scatters says, STT, utilities. Bravo02 says, X human 620s. USPS delivery man says, LF3 DPS for M1BNB, trying to get Void Dark Blade. Tenahan says, Grog LFM 2 heal 4 DPS link all. Ernie says, personal opinion what's better PvE, Bow and 2H sword or Bow and Rapier. Kali says, schematic, Orgonite breastplate WTS 12K. Scatters says, STT, crafting account fishing to craft mods to help resources. Scatters says, STT, crafting account fishing to craft mods to help resources. Scatters says, STT, crafting account fishing to craft mods to help resources. Lied says, Bow and Rapier. Viaries says, X Scorp. Superi Orpu says, gun. Sai Maiden Nakaji says, solo bow/GS, /. Scatters says, STT, mods fishing. Lied says, Rapier is top DPS RN. Sir Lambrix says, enchanted Aeternum sturgeon fishbone BMO. Kearney says, yeah for solo mostly. Tenahan says, Grog LFM 2 heal 4 DPS link all. Tenahan says, Grog LFM 2 heal 4 DPS link all. Scatters says, STT, with. Tajirion says, thanks for the group. Stepsis Vibes says, looking for anyone, we are a PvE/PvP company, new player friendly, join up and be one of the spooky scary skeletons, let's have some fun and grind our souls away on NW. Yagamai97 says, XNE. Locky Dakaki says, WTS Glass Mod Rentals. Doc Venture says, for level 65 plus PvEGS gives auto block which is nice. Tenahan says, Grog LFM 2 heal 4 DPS link all. Lied says, LOL. Armin Hammer says, X Scorp. Chestibury says, X Scorp. 92,923 says, Hot Light Spear. Myri says, X Scorp. Boruos says, X Pugworm. 2 Rise. Lazarus Don says, can I join a company PLS? Tenahan says, Rock LFM2 DPS link all. Scatters says, STT, basic code. 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 USPS delivery man says, LF3 DPS for M1BNB, trying to get Void Dark Plate. Scatters says, STT, I really like the word. 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 Squiggle says, if Bow is or main use new greatsword and finisher does about the same amount of damage with Bow only. But if we're gonna be using the second to also attack rapier is better. Prize DIKAA says, X Worm Pug. Kearney says, Tut. Holidato says, X Winter. Mia Moses says, is hump day really over if you haven't gone to sleep? Let's get a Gorgon going. WTS full, 45k, and last, 30k, boss of Hive of Gorgon compliments of Gorgmoning let us carry you before the sleepy eeps. Still CYNSVF says, Q Rand Mud. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 4 DPS link all. Cloud23 says, X Winter. UFO Donkey says, X. Nosebeard says, best perk for attuned leaper pants as DPS. Bosco Jenkins says, compliments equals $30,000 LOL. Baylor Blackstone says, what he means is scam. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 4 DPS link all. Rab says, GGSMYRK. Vieri says, LFM for Scorp. Baylor Blackstone says, don't pay for runs ever. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 4 DPS link all. Koro SHII says, Koro SHII says. UFO Donkey says, can I get a handy? Koro SHII says, Koro SHII dances. Lipshit says, LMF Life Taker. Kyla the Creator says, no. Bosco Jenkins says, isn't it part of the storyline where someone was holding an area hostage, making them pay tithing by way of the Iron Garrison? Koro SHII says, Koro SHII gives the thumbs up. Lipshit says, LFM Life Taker. Squisheezy says, remember when people harged for dungeons when they used keys? Mia Moses says, sleepy time? Haven't got your Gorgon clear for the week? Let's get that raid for you. WTS full, 45k, and last, 30k, boss no need to link gear, we got you covered. Rab says at Baylor Blackstone unless you just went to Taco Bell. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 5 DPS link all. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 5 DPS link all. B Diddy says, X for Gorg send of link. Baylor Blackstone says, what's Taco Bell have to do with it? LOL. Minerva 7 says, Minerva 7 waves. Rab says, the runs LOL. UFO Donkey says, damn now I want Taco Bell. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 5 DPS link all. Mayas Tetra says, Mayas Tetra waves. Baylor Blackstone says, LMFAO. Minerva 7 says, Minerva 7 waves. Stepsis Vibes says, best way to make gold. Baylor Blackstone says, good one. Icons Breath 3 says at Baylor Blackstone PPL pay for runs, because you hostage them for 2 hours in Echidna. Minerva 7 says, Minerva 7 flexes. Minerva 7 says, Minerva 7 makes a gesture of appreciation. Just Play 1 says, I can borrow 500k XD. Mia Moses says, oh shit. Minerva 7 says, Minerva 7 dances. Rab says, IMG0 Matthew says, yeah, but it's free. Baylor Blackstone says, I don't hostage no one, smiley face. Minerva 7 says, Minerva 7 waves. Mia Moses says, wait T. Baylor can't do that. Minerva 7 says, Minerva 7 waves. Beige Boski says, Void Dark Play. Oros says, X-Word. Fun. For funds. Just Play 1 says, someone I need help. Mayas Tetra says, Mayas Tetra waves. Minerva 7 says, Minerva 7 waves. Punker says, you need GORG. Icon Breath 3 says, Baylor helps carries get clients. True story. Squiggle says, hey Gorgon sellers, please tell your buyers not to implement the way you guys do fast Gorgon into pug groups. He's trying to one-phase everything with random asphalt. Mia Moses says, they can leave of their own free will. If they can't ADH tunnel in a Gorgon raid run. Lanny says, Major Loot Luck Trophy W. Mia Moses says, or is that not what happens? Just Play 1 says, you can borrow me 500k and we'll pay 700k. Mia Moses says, Roar Leos. Roar. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 5 DPS link all. Mia Moses says, Balzic says, happy birthday. Salter Harris says, it's not our fault they enjoy doing a 20-minute hive with us and then want to try it on their own. Mia Moses says, what's crazy, did I crash out on global yet? Rhyme says, you're saying we're doing too good a job? Pacemaker says, yes we all crashed out on you. Katarina Blue says, surprised face. Trans SECN says, I mean why would buyers do pugs when they get their clear? Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 5 DPS link all. Balzic says, teaching people to skip matches? LOL. Furious says, X. Trans SECN says, doesn't make sense. Campin60 says, yeah. Brouhaha says, www. Just Play 1 says, X. Squiddle says, you guys are pre-made, that's all they try to do, pre-made strats in pugs and don't even know mechanics. Just Play 1 says, X. Rhyme says, Crayazi comms. Pacemaker says at Squiddle you're bad. Spell says, need help with Rulgarus. Pacemaker says, PvE cope. Cinnamon29 says, X up for Gord need tank and blurvate and bleed link gear PLS. Squiddle says, I clear my runs pretty quick lol, but when I try to help Phil I get those guys. Mia Moses says, sorry we're having crash out sessions, sad face. Balzac says, honestly you can't blame the premades, nobody joins those groups to learn. C. Ire Galdra says, Q mutated. Doc Venture says, y'all got forked down to 20 minutes. Damn. Will CYNSBF says, QD. SL8Y8R says, any group running Imperial Palace. Poise says, 1. Tenahan says, Rock LFM2 heal 5 DPS link all. Melvin66 says, I just want to say sorry, sad face. Israel Wolf says, that's called ECRM. Xenix says, X Gordon. TreeZZ says, X Bird. On Point says, X. Ryubed says, X Gordon. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 5 DPS link all. Punker says, Disberg X up for Gord. On Point says, X Bird. Balzac says, LOL you don't have to say sorry, it's a game we all chillin' man. Boruos says, X Worm. Patience. Fun Pug. Werda says, X Worm. Mia Moses says, wait highway are we upset? There's literally free Gorgon discords that teach this mechanic too. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 5 DPS link all. B Diddy says, WTV the finest Casa on the server name your price. B Diddy says, Kush. Sir Dongs Kurt says, WTS Biscorgans Rapier. Mia Moses says, and for all the people talking about how I learned the raid through YouTube videos, okay then why aren't you showing me how good you are? Nogamenalin says, XWT. Boruos says, need more players on Worm for fun. X Worm. Don't X if you never played LOL. Loading. Please wait. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 5 DPS link all. Balzac says, are we mad because some of the 1 AM players been drinking and maybe they a little sloppy? Balzac says, or I don't know what is going on. Rav says, lax in gatekeeping. Raging Mage says, WTS Worm DM for details D. B Diddy says, looking for Eldorado's finest Kush. Squiddle says, yeah I used to run Learner's Gorgon but ever since server merge it's kinda impossible to teach these guys. All they wanna do is 20 minutes run on Learners. Mia Moses says, I'm under influences and I do better than pugs who say they clear consistently without linking gear sync. Boruos says, I am the gatekeeper. Boruos says, LOL. Ancient Eerie X says, X Worm Healer. Rav says, LOL not I get it it's all good. Mia Moses says, that's not even a learner's run that's a pre-made of speed clearers. Balzac says, you kind of have to expect that when you run with pugs though right? B Diddy says, looking for Eldorado's finest Kush. Balzac says, especially if we just had a large number of new players join. Irathel says, schematic, Gorgonite earring WTS. Balzac says, I'm not saying you're wrong. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 5 DPS link all. IMG0 Nasmaku says, I am, you're wrong. Moongiver Bilbo says, has anybody found the kingdom of Rubatuza yet? Irathel says, schematic, Gorgonite earring WTS. Balzac says, but that is always the risk of running with pugs. Mia Moses says, when I run with pugs who have the gear, they're still lacking on the mechanics. That's why it's so important to listen to people who have done the raid. Listo says, bots. The Hour Hoodie says, carry me Mia. Melvin66 says, sorry, can we move to global chat? I must post my high-paid run. Sad face. Orlos says, X-Worm Lights. Anjani.um says, schematic, Fortnite blunderbuss WTS. B Diddy says, Mia this is trade chat sell me cuss or shut up. Mia Moses says, I literally did a company run for someone and pugged 3 people. I'm in that call explaining to homegirl please make sure you do this or that you said you don't have Discord and you've never ran. Oros says, X-Worm LF Lights and SNS. Mia Moses says, bug. Drwink says, X-Worm Lights. Balzic says, yeah it's good. I just like that baby blue color, it was nicer than the white. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 4 DPS link all. Drwink says, X-Worm Lights. Tanking Turheal says, here isn't even everything for clearing. Our group on East that used to do actual speed sub 20 Hive did a run where we all just ran 700 max gear score for Hive just to prove it's more mechanics. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 4 DPS link all. Zane says, X Hive heal. Tanking for heal says, then this gear. Mia Moses says, well now I'm holding down push to talk while telling her to roll during echidna jumps. Tanking for heal says, well mechanics plus group comp. The Hour Hoodie says, carry me. Mia Moses says, now imagine you're not first time in DPS but tag. Balzic says, OMG okay, how do you split stacks again? X6 Sound says, X Hive run. The Hour Hoodie says, X. Mia Moses says, that shit is so hard and you really have to know what to do. Tanking for heal says, and same for Worm, we did a full naked clear for Worm except our weapons. Balzic says, I'm encumbered and need to drop wood. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 4 DPS link all. Tanking for heal says, since Worm requires 0 GS which is kind of funny. Balzic says, also curious, when is weekly reset? Cruxy says, how long did it take for a Worm clear with just weapons? Surprised face. Tanking for heal says, 12 minutes. Cruxy says, oh. Anegrid says, Tuesday is reset. Smokin' Ben says, expert. Santun says, oh. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 4 DPS link all. Mia Moses says, there's been tanks that I know that actually do a good job first timing the boss but that's because the DPS knows how to scramble and then find the spot to be with for clumping. Curry 8 Hive says, X. Tanking for heal says, on YT2 as well if you wanted to peek it too. Christian Ronald says, BRBPLS no kill if you find me in PvP area, laughing face. Tanking for heal says, naked worm raid. Sir Dong's Kurt says, WTS Gorgon's rapier. Balzic says, why are you in the PvP arena if you don't want to die? LOL. Cruxy says, surprised face, this he'll have to check it out later. Zig says, X. Sir Dong's Kurt says, WTS Gorgon's rapier. Nogamenolif says, XWT. Mia Moses says, there's a lot of DPS who don't know how to apply dots either, so when they're at Typhon they're now running around while bleeding out cause they accidentally got hit by swipe/earthquake/thorns. Humper says, LF1 DPS link here Hive of Gorgon. Humper says, no bots. Runegiver Bilbo says, unique scenarios. FR got the Vorpal Bunny Companion. Baltic says, like, if I have a night I don't want to drink, I don't go to the bar and chill. Mia Moses says, sorry you have no control over your own body and can't look down because you have stuff on your feet. Not like you're paying attention to in-game feet like that or whatever. Mia Moses says, oh no. Who's telling the wrong information? Cause the Gorgon Discord was there. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 4 DPS link all. Balzik says, okay but FR. Balzik says, which arena? Smiley face. IMG0 Nasmaku says, X wrong info please. Katarina says, get waxed. Mia Moses says, but some people just don't think joining a Discord call is enough. Some people think they can just run Gorgon for the first time with no comms. Tanking per heal says, but you'd be surprised. Pumper says, LF1 DPS link gear hive of Gorgon. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 4 DPS link all. Tanking per heal says, someone was saying that Fort Sacred plus Orb don't stack Fortify. Tanking per heal says, I thought they were joking. Tanking per heal says, but they were dead ass. Tanking per heal says, and that same person was telling other people how to play the game. Rune Giver Bilbo says, some of us are just built diff no comms needed, winky face. Don Felix XX says, you. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 4 DPS no call. Tanking per heal says, you don't need comms if you know the match's TBH, no content in this game requires it unless you're speed running or doing wars. Balzik says, LOL you should have seen it earlier. Rune Giver Bilbo says, true. Don Felix XX says, you kill. Doc Venture says, I've had 3 white claws so I'm half brain dead. Smiley face. Don Felix XX says, no. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 4 DPS link all. Rune Giver Bilbo says, he's got a point Mia, smiley face. Mia Moses says, you can't talk about new players and no comms. I'm confused. Are we complaining about paid runs? Not learning the matches? Is there something related to gatekeeping? Why are we talking about no comms? Mia Moses says, more new players. Fluink says, X upward need 3 lights. Zayn says, selling 5 carry, 2 spot left DM. Tanking per heal says, no I'm saying you don't need to do comms if you know the mechanics LOL. Tanking per heal says, obviously if you're new and learning, you should do comms. Tanking per heal says, no reason not to. Healing per tank says, always need comms. Tanking per heal says, get out of here. Healing per tank says, 3. Tanking per heal says, WTF. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 4 DPS link all. Mia Moses says, okay so what's the complaint about with new players wanting speedrun raids in Pugs? Pugs is where everyone is learning. Not too many carries are going to do charity work all the time. Rune Giver Bilbo says, 3 runes for whoever gets to the kingdom of Rubatusa, winky face. Squiddle says, each boss in Gorgon has 4 to 5 repeatable attack patterns if Bull can't get it after a few runs it's kinda skill issue. Zero says, WTV Vile as off suspended ball. Mia Moses says, there's a lot of older players who run raids with companies sure. Tanking per heal says, I don't know what you're talking about TBH Mia. Balzik says, yo, can you use old weapons as like cosmetic transmugs? Mia Moses says, sorry I'm high too, sad face. Tanking per heal says, I just got here. Malta says, she helped me LOL. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 3 DPS link all. Tanking for heel says, but I'm a yap enjoyer. Rhyme says, you guys distracted me and I outed on a paid run schmude. Mia Moses says, same, I was supposed to run forts. Furry 8 Ive says, X. Tanking for heel says, anyways, if someone wants to loan me like a nice 50-100k since I'm new to the server and hit 65 and pro tanker. The White Black says, I think the majority of chat being PPL pimping out runs over open runs brings that type of crowd and keeps others away. Balzik says, what you on me? LOL. Tanking for heel says, I'd appreciate it. Crispin Ronald says, they make team PvP content BTW so you don't have to team in the FFA area. Laughing face, that'll probably never change though unfortunately. Pacemaker says, hehe. Curry 8 Ive says, X. Yagamai 97 says, X any. Oros says, Ice. Looks like a random punk where main gonna happen T with N clear I lose. Doink says, X worm re INB. Doink says, DCD. Mia Moses says, there's no way because there are war loggers who don't even want to do the runs and waste time on pugs and build a PvE set when they're strictly PvP. Yagamai 97 says, re INB Boros. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 3 DPS link all. Melvin 66 says, BC of that, we exist. At Runegiver Bilbo. Misto says, teaming on FFA bots. Mia Moses says, I understand that's how people get the frustration of them getting blocked from war content but there's open world PvP. War loggers run all types of PvP content and will notice you in those. Mia Moses says, content too. X says, X-word. Says, to my mortal soul cry. Escamin says, you random what? Look says, what? Listo says, still getting white 1-4. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 3 DPS no fall. IMG0 Mismacu says, Q3S. Melvin 66 says, Saj at Runegiver Bilbo wanna try to feed like Hagon? IMG0 Mismacu says, it's fucking go time. Runegiver Bilbo says, yes. Sir Dogs Kurt says, WTS way less than TP Gorgon's Rapier. Tenahan says, not Gems Ward boss ... Adon Grayson says at IMG0 Nismacu did you get a fishbowl? IMG0 Nismacu says, fuck that thing. IMG0 Nismacu says, no. Adon Grayson says, LOL. IMG0 Nismacu says, the Salamander Kid says, anyone got frostbite cut? XCIE says, schematic, Gorgonite spear schematic, Gorgonite longsword WPS 40k each cheap than TP. Mia Moses says, a fucking queen TBH. Xenix says, ugly. Dante Helios says, tax. Yagamai 97 says, anyone down for worm? IH0P says, X-tax.
Look, I'm as grateful as can be that you reclaim my flag and all. But don't ask me to go on a fool crusade against those red-eyed demons. I don't need a Medal of Valor. Just a coin for me, thank you very much.
When's the next raid for like
your local friends say there's a town a bit up the road. I'll head there and sell this loot. I'll set your part aside until you get there. For my part, I'll be saving up for a ship to escape this hellish island.
3 DPS link all. Tenahan says,
Those two say there's some kind of storm wall out there, but they say a lot of things, and I don't believe a word of it. Besides, Captain Grace O'Malley never met a storm she couldn't navigate. I'll find a way. You can come with me, if you like. Have it your way, hero. I just hope you don't end up as one of those monsters yourself.
What's missing?
Don't worry about me burning you on the loot. You did me a favour and I'm good for it. As long as you survive, that is. I'll be there.
Gorgon's Rapier WTS. Tenahan says, Grog LFM 2 3 DPS link all. Purulent says, you don't need any of that stuff just to see stuff. Mia Moses says, WTS full 45k and last 30k boss for Hive of Gorgon. If you need other raids we got oh my god. Mia Moses says, poor girl. Purulent says, what prismatic stuff are you talking about? Uncle Drew says, X-Wall. Zane says, selling Hive carry, 2 spot left DM. Yagamai 97 says, X-Worm 7 spots left. Orion says, X-Worm. Help me. Chirudo says, hello. Tanking Fergil says, do you have some free heavy 725 more pieces for free? Smiling face. Tanking Fergil says, W/enchanted ward. Smiling face. Baltic says, how many coins you all sitting on? Teosa Chirudo says, who can drop me a W weapon though? Dante Kilaos says, tried to get you my offset you declined. Mia Moses says, do you want to be trapped in a raid that can't pass a kingdom? Really need that clear but can't find a group for you. Let Gorgmani carry you tonight. Chromatics, schematics, artifacts you clear. Amos Rivals says, melee weapons, prismatic scarab I see my asterisk mithril weapons, I do not see my Gorg weps there. Tenahan says, Grog LFM 2 heal 3 DPS link all. Mia Moses says, WTS full 45k and last 30k boss for Hive of Gorgon. If you need other raids we at Gorgmani got you. Rune Giver Bilbo says, they need to add more weapon types, dual daggers. TT1324 says, anyone can invite me to the group. Zingara says, they're adding 3 new weapons LOL. Pumpkin Knight says, they already add dagger on beta. Mia Moses says, also if you need a worm raid, I got a homie who's trying to plug one right now. Get your content. Pacemaker says, thanks Rune Giver. Tenahan says, Grog LFM 2 heal 3 DPS link all. Purulent says, did you try typing Borg? Pumpkin Knight says, and new class as Assassin. Purulent says, in the search bar. Zingara says, daggers, dual pistols, and a halberd. Purulent says, you may have to scroll down. Amos Rivals says, yes. Nogamenolith says, XWT please. OSO Karada says, can you fucks go to bed? I'm trying to play a regular up here LMAO. TT1324 says, anyone. Tenahan says, Grog LFM 2 heal 3 DPS link all. R20 says, major armoring crafting trophy 13.8k WTS. R20 says, major armoring crafting trophy 13.8k WTS. Purulent says, you have to have the Gorgonite essence in your inventory to see those. Vizio says, I want a whip. Amos Rivals says, okay. Purulent says, and you don't need any of the buff or clothing for that to be 725 it always is and can be crafted at LVL1. Mia Moses says, Outpost Rush it's a way to do PvP content. Amos Rivals says, oh. Mia Moses says, they have leaderboards so you can really see your damage in the game too in up here. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 3 DPS link all. Glockery says, X suppies. Dante Helios says, X up tax collector. Pumpkin Knight says,
Well, you gave it a try at least.
Lord Zio helps
Your
says,
friend is no warrior.
OPR going.
Perhaps she is like Urta, smart, and that will help her survive.
Says, Glockery no. J. Idmas says,
We must be smart too. Now that I see the corrupted in the cavern, I realize Urta was right. This is something new.
Sir Don's Kurt says, WTS cheaper than TT.
I've never seen corrupted in such numbers, and I fear they will attack our camp. I need to warn Urta.
Knight says, like Kizaru.
I am. If something happened to her, I could not bear it. She pokes fun at me sometimes, but I probably deserve it. I was looking forward to spilling corrupted blood with you. It's true. But I'd think now, I must go back to the camp. I can't let you have all the fun without me! But I also can't go when Urta is in danger! Damn it! You can have the glory today, my friend. If you find the source of the evil, destroy it and get the hell out! Urta and I will wait for you at the camp. Godspeed, warrior!
Worm raids, races, mutations, OPR, 3v3, and war. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 3 DPS link all. TT1324 says, please. Kobe NW says, join Suppy's farm. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 3 DPS link all. I can Breath 3 says, this Soda's farm is epping up my acid pool farm. Straight face. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 3 DPS link all. X500 says, yes gone quick I can't breath. Simster says, corrupted totem WTS. Irabel says, schematic, WTS. Priscilla Carroll says, X up for human. Irabel says, schematic, Gorgonite earring WTS. Yagamai 97 says, X anything. King Robin Hood says, any companies looking for PPL. Dante Helios says, help with tax collector please. Icon Breath 3 says, yet I missed 2 chests possible. Rowan McCulloch says, WTS schematic, Gorgonite boots. Balzic says, where is tax collector? Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 3 DPS link all. Salus says, need help with tax collector. Icon Breath 3 says, tax collector and CK wait for CKM. Priscilla Carroll says, X up for human idol. Baba Yaga 006 says Ancestro. Cravobo 02 says, X Sodas. Mace Winder says, X Hive. Sedia says, yes inquiring minds would like to know. Ravenstorm Pro says, X Toymaker. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 for 3 DPS link all. Roomgiver Bilbo says, oh god I gotta pay taxes LOL, smiley face. Viscancy says, XECR. Balzic says, can I do tax collector at LVL 48? Ballblade says, should I get masterwork material converted? Icon Breath 3 says, probably not. It's an elite area. Wait for ECR mate. He's real wolf says, I use it at Ballblade. Says, we got tax collector please. Ballblade says, probably not. Means maybe I'll try it out and see how it feels. Jim Wessos says, I too need the tax man. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2 heal 3 DPS link all. Helios Cheerios says, X-Toy. Ballblade says, thanks Eddie's real wolf. Mia Moses says, don't forget to pay your taxes. Nogamenolith says, XWT. Armin Hammer says,
And they shall witness the power manifest, the true future of the human race.
Bilbo says, Millie, smiley face. Singura says, Hot you're lucky I'm red bar RN LOL. Christoph 79825 says, taxes. Where's the harbor? Art Lincoln says, Wordwood Planks X5000 WTS 52P take all lower than TP. Tennyson says, Grog LFM 2 wheel 3 DPS link all. Baltic says, let's have a tea party. Sedia says, I'm a veteran so my money tax free. Grog LFM 2 wheel 2 DPS link all. Tennyson says, Grog LFM 2 wheel 2 DPS LOL yeah okay, a vegetarian who doesn't drive a car. There's a guy out there. I have to rent out the world. For them for thinking that's a thing. My character bio never showed me my fourth. Also he says, schematic, organizing WTS. Melvin66 says, WTS schematic, Organite shirt schematic, Organite gloves schematic, Organite bow schematic, Organite light staff schematic, Organite tower shield schematic, Organite hat schematic, Organite hatchet schematic, Organite mask PMO. Diamond DT says, X Softies. Chi Iavine says, anyone doing Tempest Fury. Go IEM says, no one wants any. Go IEM says, post somewhere else. Xenix says, I want them all. Bosco Jenkins says, X Suppies. Xenix says, how much? Chi Iavine says, X Winter Rune Forge. Ian Kung S Master says, Sit. XCIEO says, schematic, Gorgonite longsword schematic, Gorgonite spear WTS. Bosco Jenkins says, is there an ECR rotation running? Balzic says, UHG, hatchet greatsword is probably not a good combo for underleveled content LOL. Yagamai97 says, X anything. Kali says, schematic, Gorgonite breastplate WTS 12K. Ned says, schematic, Gorgonite 6K take. Kali says, schematic, Gorgonite breastplate WTS 12K. Kali says, schematic, Gorgonite breastplate WTS 12K. Priscilla Carroll says, X up for human idol. Nogamenolith says, XWT. Ragnar Sheep says, good to be back gentlemen. Balzic says, where you coming from Ragnar Sheep says, faraway lands. Mia Moses says, are you looking for a clear for Winter Rune Forge? Need a group that you know won't mess up? On carry today. WTS expedition for your any day needs. Balzic says, drone. LOL. Chi Iavine says, bruh. Ragnar Sheep says, haven't been on here in quite a while. Tenahan says, Grog LFM2. Balzic says, off there, what's your main these days? Moongiver Bilbo says, gonna cause some chaos here. What faction is the best headline? Blackadam says, Exotes. Balzic says, the only chaos I see. Blackadam says, X. Sedia says, Syndicate, because I'm in it. Diamond DT says, X Suppies. Ragnar Sheep says, main, nothing ATM last game I played was the BF6 beta. Balzic says, is the chat PvP, just slayed me in LBL65 zone LOL. Ballblade says, the faction of Captain George Flammel. R20 says, anyone need to kill Crown Drake and Isle. Fuckmabud says, sup y'all. Ragnar Sheep says, some Cyberpunk 77, rematch, etc. Jesus Christ says, me. Lovebush says, X subbies. Balzic says, a cool man, yet I usually come back to New World once or twice a month. R20 says, need at least 3 I think I don't know LOL. 7 says, Diamond PT says, start subbies group. Sedia says, 06 is okay. Tanking Fergia says, XX. Ragnar Sheep says, heard they changed a few things. Silas says, X tax collector. Enemy says, Rock LFM 1.2 DPS on call. Ragnar Sheep says, I am. Balzic says, and Sedia says, try off the grid. You'll thank me later. Balzic says, for Prince. Balzic says, for whatever. PT1324 says, do you guys have PT? Black Dam says, Buckbubba says, anyone. Yemweso says, X-Tax Collector. Sedia says, they identify as a stick tangent LOL. Triggs says, WTV cheap port rapier. Tenafit says, Frog LFN1 DPS link all. Happy Mia Moses says, let Lord Bonnie help you today. WTS 45K, and last, boss. Potato says, I was 6 up the tape, sad face.
Drag some!
Potato says, smiley face. SGT Mike says, anyone doing good? Tojo says, X High Priest Oscar. Hero says, XECR. Big Billy says, Simsper says, corrupted totem. Vampires I've probably seen it, but again I have TBI, so my memory is bad. Plus I smoked hella weed and I'm old. Whistle I says, X suffix. Vale Blackstone says, don't get scammed, don't pay for runs. Gimweso says, any more need for tax collectors? Potato says, I'm 56 and smoke weed, still remember my childhood though LOL. Illinois says, X-Tax. Sedia says, LMAO Gordon Ramsay or Saram Salai. Nastai says, if you're camping and hiding in PvP, you're a lemon. Mia Moses says, that's a move. Black Soldier says, X-Tax. I can breath 3 says, yeah, don't pay for runs. Get 3 hours quality time from Daily Blackstone. Myron says, that's no hype. Doc IM8 says, I'm 41. Paul Blade says, LOL. Omega W says, WTS 3 hours with Vale and Lasco. DM for intro, smiley face. Singer says, you can respond at the camp when you're done. Tojo says, Dino ET says, Blackstone says, all me for scamming. I like pretty much living, smiley face. Lord Ika says, X. MRCJ says, XYRK. And basic crap. Officer Nasty says, XYRK. MRCJ says, every time you want to Definitely how intents would not recommend. Me says, who's scamming? Not Court Money, that's for sure. He's Real Wolf says, last season battle had fall. Potato says, we had no internet back then LOL damn I'm old. Sedia says, Oregon Trail. Bo says, you Deftones fans in here? Baylor Blackstone says, if you charge for free content you're scamming, period. Fish in Milk TE says, 111. Balzic says, maybe one Deftone fan, cause White Pony and he says, tunnel on the TI-994A was awesome. Mia Moses says, your Uber Eats you're getting scammed too. UFO Donkey says, tunnels. Balzic says, but the core apple no. GORG, DPSDM link. Kinlamu says, LF run GORG, DPSDM link 910s. Selene Castle says, STFU. Mia Moses says, go drive your lazy ass over there instead of getting a paid service. Rowan My Kayak says, people paying for runs are just giving the gold back to the people that sold it. Adon Grayson says, LOL at Mia Moses. Bo says, Oi no yo comp fans here, awesome album. Lou Enzia says, we were enjoying the show. Balzic says, you'll check it out. MRCJ says, INBMYRK. Setia says, Potato and others why. Bosco Jenkins says, Q for up here. Bot47 says, sorry I only listened to John Denver. Balzic says, when did it drop? W says, WTS Baylor up, DM for info, smiley face. Mia Moses says, I don't use PH so I feel it. I'm ontogens. Whatever so I get it. Get free content where you can. I just deal with slow servers. IH0P says, stop yapping in recruitment. Rage BRB says, Blackstone says, I suppose you don't watch the dead live stream and to be sold. Blackstone says, XMYR. Portals are XMYR. Rosemary for sure. Rowan McCack says, sellers in patch. Morgan Williams says, recruitment is for recruitment. Players helping players, not scams. Balzic says, where is the most played? Officer Nasty says, still not stopping. Zero says, XMYRK. Collapsitarian says, I'm trying to build a Rend Hammer sword for 75. Says, you want to be taught, you're welcome to learn. There's Bosco Jenkins says, XMYRK. Mia Moses says, one person who knows the raid but multiple people. Balzic says, you'll check it out, Swerve City TVH is no better than the entire core album. Says, special place in my brain. Officer Nasty says, XMYRK. Vela Blackstone says, 97 says, X anything. Kinlamu says, LFGORG, DPS second. Singura says, Collapsitarian says, I'll watch a YouTube video. You A08 X high do you need help with? How many? A08 says, X5 DPS. Sedia, I'm new and started as a main. Sorry, no help. She says, I don't know if work is so easy. Why do people have to charge so much to bring one extra person through it? Answer 013 says, XMYRK. Rage BRB says, XMYRK. Ballsy says, honestly a lot of us are new. Baylor Blackstone says, they don't have to. They could help for free and not scam people. Potato says, what do you need help with? Mia Moses says, yet I wonder why it's so expensive if people are having to buy it. Hero P says, guys. Baylor Blackstone says, only game I played where peeps scam other players. Mia Moses says, is it because it really is that hard to find a group? Sad face. IH0P says, STFU. Tenahan says, Grog LFN1 DPS link all boss 1. Baby Blackstone says, it is not hard to find a group. Says, I mean it's honest. Lord really is one of the EASA raids in any MMO I have played. Tenahan says, Grog LFN1 DPS link all boss 1. Uncle says, can I get some help killing the boss in the wall? Nogamenolip says, XW. Taylor Blackstone says, and it's not hard to get completion either. Bosco says, join MVP run, 6 minutes. Taylor Blackstone says, for free. Bot 47 says, someone needs a Snickers. Baylor Blackstone says, without being scammed. Mace Winder says, XMYRK. Morgan Williams says, the devs will ban these clowns selling runs instead of players helping players as intended in due time, so chill. AOSCO says, crack. Mace Winder says, XMYRK. Gamble91 says, LOL. Mia Moses says at Salapaski to get more hard runes you want to run some expeditions. Minor hard rune of the Devourer. This is only found in the 20-man raid called Worm. Mia Moses says, that's why it's so important to run expeditions. Balzic says, I usually just hop on here like 2 to 3 times a month. To chill and do life skills, talk music, and bust dad jokes. Officer Nasty says, XMYRK. Zingara says, second and third boss mechanics are really easy. Only first boss is somewhat hard but still easy. Answer 013 says, XMYRK. Tenaman says, Grog LFM1 DPS link all boss 1. Willow Boss says, anyone wanna join Barrows? Potato says, games are about fun, do what you like that's fun to you. Stubby Our Buddy says, how to get the finisher art of a cat. Tenahan says, Grog LFM1 DPS link all boss 1. Singuru says, like I said, I wish there was some sort of raid finder. Tenahan says, Grog LFM1 DPS link all boss 1. Bosco Jenkins says, MYRK 10/20ths. Reben says, XMYRK. Harriet says, XMYRK. Balzic says, and usually this game is like super dead at this time of night, but like the past bit, the game has been bumpin'. I'm Cleric says, Which rule says you can't sell carries? Anegrit says at Salapaski also, you can upgrade heart runes at the Stonecutter station. G. Iovine says, when crafting organ gear at outfitting station, how to do you get magnified? Do you just not put anything? Play Store says, X high DPS. Morgan Williams says, anyone need healer for the run? Willem says, Starstone Barrows Expedition. Tenafin says, Grog LFM1 DPS link all boss 1. Yuki Tojo says, X says, X high DPS finisher. Mia Moses says, let's be real. Guys talk about gaming, but how come you don't talk to the person who asked your question of recruitment? Why are you instead fighting me over selling runs? Chase M101 says at Stubby Hour Buddy, there's a mammoth boss on Isle of Zurban, beneath the gorilla where you get Light Taker and Gold Caster. It's not the 3 mammoths, it's the singular large mammoth. Allsix says, and I feel like we got a lot of new players, and we all chillin', but yet we're short and hard to get like advice in chat. PG says, I didn't see it. Rage BRB says, NYRK11/20. Eosco says, Hustler wrong with it. Also says, just keep asking, and maybe find a company, or see if someone take you in a dungeon and see if they chill and maybe join up with them. Sancho14 says, new player here. Any question is overrun by sales. Viston C says, if you guys DNT get out the recruitment, I hope you step on a liquor. Kostiazi says, XMYRK. Zingarav says, much love to everyone. NW the GOAT. Mia Moses says, and yet, I did. Go scroll up instead of fighting me, because even though I'm promoting content that people have to pay in-game money for, at least I also have the decency to help people instead of just. Mia Moses says, complain. Mia Moses says, oh no. Luffy Chias says, XMYRK. Peachy says, yikes. Lussy Beauty says, X-Gord DPS. Ballblade says, is farming Medusa worth it? Sancho14 says, womp. Balzic says, but on a side note, I just finished listening to Rosemary. Yeah, okay, yeah man, it's good. Ballblade says, I just beat her for first time. Magnus Delamanti says, gentlemen. Emil says, I haven't played in a while, is the life staff still the only healer weapon? Bosco Jenkins says, NYRK1320's first portal. Rage BRB says, NYRK1320. Magnus Delamanti says, what do you suggest for Stonecutter training? Tivona says, life staff for pure heals, Void and Flail both do some heals. Emil says, okay time. Fish Tidy says, there's no way people are still arguing about buying Hive runs hours later. Studio Hour Hoodie says, X Turbag. Tidge says, XMYRK. Morgan Williams says, anyone need healer for Organ Run? Sancho14 says, or Stone. Mine. Anegrit says, come on. This is global chat, of course they are. More Gold says, when is Scorpio active, need him for musket. Fish Tidy says, no. Someone was just crashing into it. VEIID says, it's not. Bo says, Scorpio I believe at dawn. Balzic says, we are maybe for the first time in global chat. Rage BRB says, NYRK1520's. Malta says, LOL. R20 says, Wordwood Planks X5000 WTS 52K take all. Adon Grayson says, I am almost capped with my coins, what should I do with it? Oh, I guess I can buy a trial run. Lily Phillips says, make it your mom and auntie Ilbot. Warbolt says, is Scorpio a dude I can face alone or do I need pals? Chase M101 says, shame on you, being gold cap and buying runs, tongue sticking out. Fish Tidy says at Warbolt Scorpio only spawns at night. Adon Grayson says, LOL. Mia Moses says, thank you Balzac for trying to be helpful on Global. There aren't that many people who want to help others, and I think at least acknowledging a person helps them feel seen in a community like this. Balzac says at Warbolt only one way to find out. Baylor Blackstone says, calling bullshit there, see peeps helping all the time. M1CHUU says, Gorgon's musket, Gorgon's spear WTS. BDI says, please. Warbolt says, cheers guys, I appreciate y'all. Adon Grayson says, then people should stop doing fun ECR runs and other events. We all get going from. LOL. Mia Moses says, there are people that help new players out. Like the Gorgon Discord. Sancho14 says, GG. Warbolt says, I'm a new 65, I feel totally lost. Chase M101 says, hashtag hosting ECRs but pay me gold first. Lily Phillips says, also flooding recruitment with the fight drowning out the actual recruitment. Come on now, we got global for that. Aeternum says. Reagan Attic SMA says, WTS Gorgon's hand covers, Gorgon's hand covers, Gorgon's hand covers, Gorgon's hand covers, Gorgon's hand covers. Fish Tidy says, I would watch a video or two about endgame at Warbolt, there's a lot you can do as a fresh 65. Malcast says, X anything. Bosco Jenkins says, Portal 2 starting, M1RK1420s. Mia Moses says, doing asterisk. BDIIA says, my alt only has 250.
You steal that which is mine. You assault my followers. And now you disrupt my plans. This is personal.
Sancho 14 says, StarCraft. Sweaty Asta says, RuneScape. IH0P says, XNYRK. Salapaski says, anyone want to help with your deal? Leonesco says, I can heal. Salapaski says, anyone people loud. Mia says, promote X global chat, X for global chat, all of which maybe should also be in the recruitment, but no one bats enough. Gorda says, but then they also get more asking for raids in global too. You ain't see nobody really use the help. Mia Moses says, section to actually ask for help. AO says,
Yet you live!
I have PP flag.
Corruption has even receded away from our camp!
Mia Moses says, they're all gonna ask for help in global recruitment.
Some kind of abomination? A corruption rift! I've heard tales of such things. Shut the bastards down, did you? Ah! You short time, and already vanquishing the corrupted! A feat fit for legend!
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But we must not going to isolate the currents. Dark
oh, you have no idea how deep Mia can get their
In the past,
Wait.
an avatar has risen and
Teacher
led the
says,
corrupted in a
Eric,
campaign to consume all
it's
of.
HE boards.
No souls are safe
Algon
from
Grayson
their
says,
reach.
puns intended.
If you had it, it's unlikely you would be hit,
Air Force Black.
but
Kill
make
for
no mistake, he's coming, and we must
Wolf
warn
says,
the nearby towns. I would give it the
he
best.
says,
There have been some standings between Elstrom and the town guard in the
Mia
past.
Moses says,
And
chat.
your valor
Which
is
can be
deserving
interpreted
of the reward to rule the town.
And
Poison
balls ag-
and get a cup of meat. You earned it.
Dumb you can't and enables clowns to hold the Peachy says, ex-toymaker, he'll help. Salapaski says, can anyone help with Ordeal the Scorpion? Mia Moses says, nothing ever really is deep cut. Sad face. Balzic says, but TBH, out of the 7 dwarves only one of them is happy. Ruined Puzzle says, Mia this. Mia Moses says, thanks Ruined but I ain't got no hands XD. Salapaski says, can anyone help me kill Ordeal the Scorpion? Irabel says, schematic, organize your ring WTS. Selene Castle says, XMYRK. Ruined Puzzle says, Irabel says, schematic, organize your ring WTS. Castillera says, X-Toymaker. Fish Tidy says, you can't matchmake high because of how specific people's builds have to be. There's almost no point in having a matchmaking when everyone's going to be just as picky if not more with recruitments. Baldwin says, what do you call somebody with no hands, no feet, pinned to a wall? Bosco Jenkins says, MYRK 1920s, heading to mines after MYRK, almost at the third portal now. Collapsitarian says, Toymaker 5/ Heal for pants turn X up in chat. We are about to go, so X up now or maybe it will be too late. Salapaski says, it's going to be night somewhat soon. Selene Castle says, XMYRK. Selene Castle says, XMYRK. Sweaty Aspa says, what's Rune Blaz? Mia Moses says, yeah, go link your gear and see how many people will invite you. Then see how many people will blame you for your gear when it's really another person's mechanics. Sweaty Asta says, Rune Blast. IH0P says, carrot. Uncle Drew says, can I get help killing the boss at the west wall? Sestro says, X show these. Collapsitarian says, Toymaker 5/ Heal for pants perk X up in chat. We are about to go, so X up now or maybe it will be too late. Fish Tidy says, it's like gems, but stronger. Chase M101 says at Sweaty Ass it's a weaker cut pristine gem with extra buffs. Selene Castle says, XMYRK. Balzic says, you never said Koinoyokon was good. Thank you. It was the last good Death Note album so far. CAX Tonic of Selene Castle says, Sound says, why am I in your head? Selene says, MFXNYRK. 2TZSCWF Kai says, some miles on Lakes Bio. Sweaty Aspen says, X6 Sound says, free. CCCVF says, run attack run, and die LMAO. Sweaty Aspen says, I'm still learning. TTZSCVF Tai says, imagine using SNS and hatchet light metal getting killed by only a flail LMAO. Stubby Our Buddy says, Sir Bad. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Organ Need Tank 0/1 Heal 2 Halves Bled 0/1 Rent SNS/1 Evade 0/4 Live All Year.
Come closer. It is time you know the whole truth.
Risky says, X Zygo Healer needed. LFM Fresh Organ Need Tank 0/1 SNS 0/1 Evade 0/4 Link All Gear DM me and have 3x in-house Major Angry Earth Combat Trophy. Tinker says, no meta, every weapon is viable. Yamil says, would y'all say there's more tanks or healers in NW? Black Bell says,
This
X6
island
Sound
has
says,
always
what 1v1
guarded
did
the
we fight?
promise of paradise.
Virulent says, Flail
Humanity
is way more
cast
meta than
out,
SNS Hatchet
deemed
LOL.
unworthy of such
Chase
blessings.
M101 says, more
I
healers.
did not come here seeking
Boski
paradise.
says, X
I
Zygo
came
healer
for
needed.
answers,
Yamil says,
redemption after a
OKTYY.
life of weakness and
Adon
suffering.
Grayson says at
And I
ZAXS that
found
sounds
a
stressful.
truth that disproved
LOL.
everything I had
Cinderer
been
says,
taught.
just gotta block Flail
I
and
tasted
GG.
the knowledge forbidden
Mia
to
Moses
us at
says,
creation.
WDY and
I
too
saw
much
the
rules and black
vision
belt.
of humanity's
What's too
true
much?
potential.
Mia Moses
I
says,
knew then.
aren't you guys trying to get
I
into a
must
Gorgon raid?
correct this ancient
That's literally the
injustice
requirements.
and restore the power
X6 Sound
which is
says,
rightfully
you guys
ours.
is talking to like it was a 1v1.
The heart of the
X6 Sound
mountain
says,
now beats
loser.
strong with this purpose.
Virulent says, Flail
After
is
a
actually the
century of
flavor of the month
preparation,
Martin and that's
our
arguably worse
campaign
than
has
meta.
begun.
Kindle
The
says,
island's townships already fall before the
ZAXS
might
says,
of our
Hoplite
armies.
Life Staff, Hoplite
The
Void
only
Gauntlet,
thing I had
Hoplite
not
Spear,
foreseen
Hoplite Fire Staff,
is
Morgan
you.
Spell, Hoplite Ice Gauntlet Finisher, Hoplite Hatchet, Hoplite Blunderbuss,
Who
Hoplite
have
Tower Shield.
stolen the gift meant for
Kinlaw
me.
says, because
And
you all
now
knew.
your soul will pay the
Kinlaw
price.
says,
For I
XD.
will not stop until I
Adon
have
Grayson says,
seized back
Surik
the
is at
destiny
Miyamoto's
stolen from
LOL.
us and brought true
Miyamoto
freedom to
says,
the world.
and anyone
both
that talks about how they have
old
700
and
plus gear score and not even know what perks they need. That's a little confusing too. Bosco Jenkins says, how is it a carry if you have to come in perfect and know the fight? Why would someone pay for that? Mace Winder says, Void Slayer's gauntlets of the soldier. Morgan Williams says, trying to join a hive run is a joke, need a matchmake feature ASAP. Tinkerer says, flavor of the month LOL. Good OLLOL days. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Morgan Meat Tank 0/1 Heal 2 Halves Bled 0/1 Rent 1/1 SNS 0/1 Evade 0/4 Link All Gear DM me and have 3x in-house Major Angry Earth Combat Trophy. Neomosis says, that's not a carry. Zaxxas is trying to do a free pug. Tanking for heal says, because you're trying to get into a group that doesn't need to run it. Icon Fresh 3 says, 07. Nogomenolith says, XWT. Adon Grayson says, free pug with requirements. LOL. Sestro says, X Chodies. Zingara says, miss playing Thresh. Was such a fun support. Miyamosis says, now it would be different if they were promoting a seller's run where they don't care to ask you to link your gear or ask what role you're playing. They have the core people who will do that for you. Morgan Williams says, I'm a healer. Adon Grayson says, free isn't really free y'all. You have to get geared yourself first and know the match, then it's free. LOL. Mia Moses says, let's watch you run a raid without having proper gear and knowing mechanics outside of watching a few speed clear tutorial videos. I can Bref 3 says, that guys wants to be carried. For free LOL. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Organ Need Tank 0/1 Heal 2 Halves Bled 0/1 Rend 1/1 SNS 0/1 Evade 0/4 Link All Gear DM me and have 3x in-house Major Angry Earth Combat Trophy. XCIEO says, Schematic, Gorgonite Longsword Schematic, Gorgonite Spear WTS. I'm Cleric says, good luck going through Hive without a proper team comm. Bosco Jenkins says, a properly made game shouldn't need players to look at YouTube videos to understand mechanics. Tanking for Heal says, you don't need YouTube videos to understand mechanics. Tobert says, preach. Tanking for Heal says, the mechanics in the raid is easy to learn. Bosco Jenkins says, yep. Tanking for Heal says, but if you want to join a group that knows it. Bosco Jenkins says, shouldn't have to watch a guide. Just have to have a great build going in, with all the potential buffs why how could ever need. He's Real Wolf says, why are we talking in recruitment? Mia Moses says, I definitely love playing Pokemon because of how quickly I can run the game without a guide. Mia Moses says, I is real. Tanking for Heal says, otherwise you'd have to make a group yourself and mention it's a learner's run. He's Real Wolf says, Hero Mia. I'm Cleric says, yes, go into content blind when you could give yourself a slight advantage by taking some time out of your day to learn some things before starting. Yim Wesos says, I agree, get off recruit. Tanking for Heal says, no. Tanking for Heal says, pay me 100k to get off recruit. BEIID says, recruiting more PPL to chat in recruit. Mia Moses says, I'd help as a learner no problem. Let's see how well the raid goes with majority new players who aren't properly geared and don't have raid mechanics down. Bosco Jenkins says, at the final portal in MYRK 1920ths, about to go to mines after, starting at 2 PM PST. Mia Moses says, oh wait, no, you guys don't need YouTube. The game is just that easy, you can run in without knowing anything. Adon Grayson says at Mia Moses is just being at Mia Moses helpful. Smiley face, and getting smacked for it LOL, sad face. He's Real Wolf says, I wanna be part of that at Mia Moses LMAO, wanna see it all go bad. Tanking for Heal says, the amount of Dogwater 725 gear I've seen is insane, and I generally just ignore their requests. BEIID says, PLS stream that. Yim Wesos says, who cares, it's a learning experience. Mia Moses says, yeah, I don't mind joining X-Cord. Mia Moses says, let's see what the pugs got. Mia Moses says, teach me what you know, smiley face. Tanking for Heal says, learning the raid is fine, trying to get into a group that wants experienced players is another. Bosco Jenkins says, mine's run starting at 2 PM. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Organ Need Tank 0/1 Heal 2 Halves Bled 0/1 Rend 1/1 SNS 0/1 Evade 0/4 Link All Gear DM me and have 3x in-house Major Angry Earth Combat Trophy. X500 says, subbies are 2x up 4/20ths. Kobe NW says, WTS worm cleared, DM for info, smiley face. Mia Moses says, I definitely didn't. My alt doesn't have this gear. I remember running Hive of Gorgon for months and not clear it. Anaveba says, res. Chase M101 says, what for? Mia Moses says, but I learned it. I didn't get mad that I learned it. Tanking for Heel says, TBF it took our group 2 hours the first time on day 1 of Hive LOL. I'm Cleric says, I remember when I didn't have gear that was considered essential for Hive. But I didn't cry about it. I went and got it like a big boy. He's Real Wolf says, Hive was hard to learn. I was here when it first came out and most of us just needed maybe 2 to 5 steps before learning LOL. Purulent says, X up for Vent Aconite Venom quests. Tanking for Heel says, but we're all speed runners and had a full understanding of the game and build, so we already had the proper comp for it. Tanking for Heel says, but also skip matches. Husk says, not yet. Tanking for Heel says, and we were all 700 GS. Bosco Jenkins says, Port to Alazers recalled in the Great Cleave at 2 PM Pacvic for a Mines chest run. BEIID says, watching heavy DPS do nothing to Echidna is one of the small joys in life. Mia Moses says, is it night time? Purulent says, heavy DPS is like saying wet fire. Stubby Hour Hoodie says, X Mondropolitan. Bosco Jenkins says, OLOL 2 AM, whoops. Crispin Ronald says, big dabs if you're still there, cheers, that one was for you. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Morgan need tank 0/1 heal 2 halves bled 0/1 rend 1/1 SNS 0/1 evade 0/4 link all gear DM me and have 3x in house major angry earth combat trophy. Bjorn Odinson says, anyone down for regular Tempest card? Mia Moses says, hey dude, some people are afraid of mechanics and need to run the raid in range. Does that mean they know the mechanics? No, they probably are dying on pillar second phase. Mia Moses says, not even realizing what's killing them. Nogamenolov says, XWT. Los Santos says, dummy frame, what's this? Purulent says, you can make a target dummy in furnishing. Tanking for Heel says, running 300 con as a ranged DPS. Purulent says, for your house. Reknastai says, LFM2 group I'm DPS. Stubby Hour Hoodie says, can anyone help with Mondropolitan? Morgan Williams says, guess noon in this server is actually helping players only psing about dumb shit in recruitment. Los Santos says, tough. R20 says, major armoring crafting trophy 13.8k flash sale. Tanking for Heel says, yes. Mia Moses says, oh no help, sad face. Mia Moses says, I help people by answering questions on Discord. Los Santos says, yes. Mia Moses says, not everyone can get on the game and answer people's questions in real time. Mia Moses says, plenty of knowledgeable people outside of the game. Kato Ni says, no thank you. BEIID says, I prefer use West Salt Mines, all my answers are there. Purulent says, X Beds Queen. Morgan Williams says, no one is actually recruiting. Reknastai says, LFM2 group I'm DPS. Tanking for Heel says, you're not joining that M2 OPM. Husk says, Scorp is up. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Gorgon need tank 1/1 heal 1 half bled 0/1 rend 1/1 SNS 0/1 evade 0/4 link all gear DM me and have 3x in-house major angry earth combat trophy. Missler says, Farm X Shoties infused armor scraps, infused engineering scraps, infused arcane scraps, infused weapon scraps, valuable weapon scraps 18/20ths. Deem Tier says, I'm new any low LVLDNGS? Morgan Williams says, I'm a healer. Inman07 says, I'm a move back to Scorp, I'm unplagio. Stubby Our Buddy says, X Montrable 420ths. Chase M101 says at Deem Tier don't WRRY about dungeons, just follow the MSQ. Jake Hartz says, X Montrable. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Morgan need tank 1/1 heal 1 half bled 0/1 rend 1/1 SNS 0/1 evade 0/4 link all gear DMC and have 3x in-house major angry earth combat trophy. Stubby Our Buddy says, X Montrapala 520ths. I'm Cleric says, explain Yim. Chase M101 says, WDYM by that. Mia Moses says, does it really matter if there's more tanks or more healers? At the end of the day you're welcome to switch out your builds and try whatever. At Yamil. Yimwesos says, don't want to help newer PPL. Deem Tier says, long MSQ. I'm Cleric says you. Mia Moses says, endless choices of weapon combos so long as you're interested in theory crafting. Tanking for heal says, but I've done hundreds of learner hive and worm runs on East servers. Tanking for heal says, but when I wanna sell runs. Tanking for heal says, because I'm burnt from free teaching. Husk says, Scorp is up. Tanking for heal says, smiley face. TT1324 says, can you guys invite me please? Dr. Jackie II says, X Scorp. Mikey Chu says, open door. Stubby Our Buddy says, X Montrapala 420ths. Yimwesos says, LOL you're right. Bosco Jenkins says, maybe a couple more minutes. Morgan Williams says, Yim isn't wrong. I've soloed the entire game cause noon will help without benefits. I'm Cleric says, you soloed Hive of Gorgons and Trial of the Devourer. Mia Moses says at TT1324 congrats on being new. Hope you're enjoying the game so far. Are you running MSQ to get to 65 or just enjoying the scenery that is New World? There's a lot of pretty content in this game. I'm Cleric says, PLS tell me you have VODs. Yimwesos says, exactly Morgan. Husk says, Scorp is up. Mia Moses says, at least I hope you find a company that can assist you into the experience you're looking for, smiley face. Bosco Jenkins says, mine's 1320ths. VEIID says, no they soloed leveling up, you know. The tutorial. Tanking for heal says, anyways does a DPS want to join for a quick luz with me and a healer? I'm Cleric says, Nico 2.0 says, X-Board. I'm Cleric says, so they haven't soloed the whole game. I'm Cleric says, what a fibber. Adon Grayson says, oh a mine's run. I guess I can make more coins LOL. Summon Demon says, it's so fun. Pixel to Paper says, I love flags. Summon Demon says, flags have colors. Tanking for heal says, this day. Yimwesos says, but I have a group of friends we are gonna change that, I won't charge for runs. Summon Demon says, but if you can't see colors it's okay, it's still fun. Fall Blade says, LOL. JSMUG925 says, X Suppies. Morgan Williams says, that would definitely change things. Baron I28 says, Kuneon Sia Seaton. Yimwesos says, we will help, well on our way to learn and teach. Tanking for heal says, say that after you've done over 100 learner runs and when asked about learners, you don't have the group because they don't want to waste their time anymore. Forge Berry says, X Suckers. Sestro says, X Chodies. Setia says, I won't charge your help with anything in game. Lussy Beauty says, X Chodies. VEIID says, FR I want work to be 30 minutes of my week not hours daily. Yemwesos says, it's not a waste when we learn together. I'm Cleric says, I wish him and Morgan the best of luck on their endeavor. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Morgan need tank ready 1/1 heal 1/2 bled 0/1 ren 0/1 SNS 0/1 evade 1/4 link all gear DM me and have 3x in-house major angry earth combat trophy. Tanking per heal says, obviously it's not a waste if you're learning it too. Wargold says, Setia a legend can attest. JsMove925 says, X Suppies. VEIID says, don't watch YouTube vids though that's cheating. Mia Moses says at Yemwesos WDYM. I literally promote learner discords for new people. There are companies out there promoting that they're looking for new and experienced players to help with end game content. Muppins says, anyone do an M2S? Loading. Please wait. Tanking per heal says, people that want help seem to not realize there are sources out there to help. I'm Cleric says, don't worry Mia, they already know, they just decide to ignore it because they want to play victim. Tanking per heal says, and people who need help. Stubby Our Hoodie says, X Montrapala spawning in 5 minutes for 20ths. Twisted Fang says, can anyone help me with my first Starstorm Barrows? I made a lobby. Bjorn Odinson says, LFM for Rake Tempest Hard. Peachy says, sure Twisted, invite me. Morgan Williams says, just need to get a group together so can actually run it. TT1324 says, anyone can invite me to the group, just tell me yes or no please and thanks. M1CHUU says, WTB Bow 725 with Fit plus Rapid Shot plus Keenly Empowered. Setia says, attest what I'm stoned LOL. Yemwesos says, hands on. Tanking per heal says, so it's not good to watch beforehand. VEIID says, that's the attitude, go get them tiger. I'm Cleric says, best way to learn is to do both. JTU says, guys stop arguing and just play here then we know who's the best. VEIID says, no he's right let him be. Mia Moses says, I'll link my gear but it's really bad. Amanda Garcia says, evade rapier. Dubstel says, Q random muds. TT1324 says, bro. JSLib925 says, X Suppies. Mia Moses says, lumberjack hat, lumberjack shirt, lumberjack gloves, lumberjack pants, lumberjack shoes, here's my other gear. Tanking per heal says, basic straight amount charm. Wickedly Stoned says, I need a damn paid run, just haven't done it yet. Setia says, what y'all doing now? Asuna Zero says, LF dive. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Organ need tank ready 1/1 heal 1/2 bled 0/1 ren 0/1 SNS 0/1 evade 1/4 link all gear DM me and have 3x in-house major angry earth combat trophy. Rab says at Mia Moses as a Canadian, I approve. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Gorgon need tank ready 1/1 heal 1/2 bled 0/1 ren 0/1 SNS 0/1 evade 1/4 link all gear DM me and have 3x in-house major angry earth combat trophy. Bjorn Odinson says, LFM for regular Tempest Heart. Morgan Williams says, again I'm a healer. Mia Moses says, oh you need a healer Bill? Orange Blue says, many pro at NW so far. SGT Mike says, any farms out there? Stubby Our Buddy says, X Mont Rapala spawning in 3 minutes 5/20. Mia Moses says, Silken Lithium Nimble Coat Hoplite Hand Covers Hoplite Pants Reinforced Primordial Cloth Boots of the Soldier Gorgon's Amulet Gorgon's Ring Hoplite Earring Hoplite Life Staff Power Stone Sorry mine kinda sucks too. Jibsk says, X Suppies. Mia Moses says, I don't have this boots. SGT Mike says, X Suppies. Bob the Fancy says, X Mont Rapala. VEIID says, Scorpion Sting Gorgonite Warhammer Gorgon's Horns Vampires Vestments Gorgon's Hand Covers Hoplite Legards Gorgonite Sandals Gorgon's Amulet Gorgon's Earring Gorgonite Ring typically red. Bob the Fancy says, X Mont Rapala. Mia Moses says, WTF how do you get to the beds area? Mia Moses says, why am I so lost? Stubby Our Buddy says, X Mont Rapala spawning in 2 minutes 6/20. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Gorgon need tank ready 1/1 heal 1/2 bled 0/1 rend 1/1 SNS 0/1 of 8 2/4 link all gear DM me and have 3x in-house major Angry Earth Combat Trophy. Idishio the Rat says, surprisingly few people farming star metal at Eben Scale RN if anyone is hungry for some star metal. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Gorgon need tank ready 1/1 heal 1/2 bled 0/1 rend 1/1 SNS 0/1 of 8 2/4 link all gear DM me and have 3x in-house major Angry Earth Combat Trophy. Jibsk says, X Suppies. Orange Blue says, I played a lot of games but this some different haha. Stubby Our Buddy says, X Mont Rapala spawn 6/20. Chase M101 says, beds in Brimstone? Isn't that just north of Wickle Al Waha? Morgan Williams says, of course not gonna let this healer join BS. Jason Yu says, Hoplite mask Hoplite shirt as off crystal hand covers Hoplite legards winged leather shoes Hoplite musket serenity Gorgon's amulet elemental band Gorgon's earring stalwart heart rune of stone form. Cardi09 says, WTB armor matrix. Dastin Tempest says, do trophy buff stack in different house? Purulent says, Mia is hacking. She's flagged in my PvE group. Icewall0W says, yes. Morgan Williams says, 707 gear score isn't good enough, they'll only let 725s join us holding the hive hostage without matchmakeability. Dastin Tempest says, oh, those are huge buff dan. Chase M101 says, it's not gear score, it's perks. Mia Moses says, I'm not even 725, uneasy face. Hop the Tayosi says, need help W portals in RW. Tanky Fergil says, a group wanting only 725 is a trap hive. Mia Moses says, reinforced primordial cloth boots of the soldier, these are my boots. Icewall0W says, only one of each per house.
Welcome to Pridewen, traveller. I do hope you're the honourable sort. Security is critical right now, but you seem friendly enough.
Says,
carry on!
Recruiting based off gear score. Setia says, flag means player is...
Welcome to Pridewen, traveller. I do...
Says, still not that. Chase M101 says, you can still be shit while being 725. ZAXS says, LFM Fresh Gorgon need tank ready 1/1 heal 1/2 bled 0/1 rend 1/1 SNS 0/1 of 8 2/4 link all gear DM me and have 3x in-house major Angry Earth Combat Trophy. Bjorn Odinson says, LFM for Tempest's hard regular. ZAXS CAXS says, LFM fresh organ need tank ready 1/1 heal 1 half lead 0/1 rend 1/1 SNS 0/1 of a 2/4 link all gear DM me and have 3x in-house major angry earth combat trophy. Collapsitarian says, anyone know what the rend cap is on hive bosses? Chase M101 says, still the SHT also having perks too. Purulent says, yes she's flagged for PvP in my PvE party which should be possible. Purulent says, shouldn't asterisk. I'm Cleric says, someone who has the right perks for their gear tends to have a much better understanding than someone who has the wrong ones. Mia Moses says, yeah I ran Gorgon with lower gear score like 690 but because I had good perks and knew how to run the raid, I get excited. Tanking for heal says, the lowest you can be for hive is 690. M1CHUU says, WTB about 725 with div plus rapid shot plus keenly empowered. Tanking for heal says, because of the penalties unlike Worm. Sedia says, I'm new so trying to understand the lingo, I'm old. Collapsitarian says, the last I knew, players can be flagged in random expeditions. Collapsitarian says, Carrot for some reason it does not force everyone OTB in the same faction or flag. Snoopy Our Hoodie says, X Mondrapala spawning in 6 minutes for 20th. Purulent says, open world. Collapsitarian says, not do that in normal open world groups or through GM. CAXS says, LFM fresh organ need tank ready 1/1 heal 1 half bled 0/1 rend 1/1 SNS 0/1 of a 2/4 link all gear DM me and a 3x in-house major angry earth combat trophy schematic, Organite helm schematic, Organite musket. Purulent says, we were in the open world killing fans. CAXS says, LFM fresh organ need tank ready 1/1 heal 1 half bled 0/1 rend 1/1 SNS 0/1 of a 2/4 link all gear DM me and a 3x in-house major angry earth combat trophy schematic, Organite musket schematic, Organite helm. Purulent says, not in a mutation LOL that would be totally normal. Chase M101 says, I gotta have a schematic in my house. Tom says, WTS schematic Organite amulet. Bjornodinson says, LFM for regular Tempest heart. Need for Void Dark play. Morgan Williams says, Primeval cloth robe hat of the Sage Primeval Brint chest guard of the Sage Gorgon's hand covers attuned leather pants Primeval Brint shoes of the Sentry Gorgon's earring Gorgon's ring Gorgon's amulet Brutal heart ring of dark descent frozen life staff of the Sage. Stevie Our Hoodie says, X Montrapala 420th get. Team Tier says, where do you mine lower LVL stuff? Mia Moses says, I usually mine in Windsward. Chase M101 says at Bjorn Odinson helping out a finisher group, will help if still available after I'm done. Adon Grayson says, F8 Starscope. Bjorn Odinson says, tough. MR Clorox Cleaner says, X. Your build needs some work, it's not the gear score that people are denying. Mia says, there's pretty much the best route for farming iron, star metal and slow on getting higher tier mats along the way. Chase M101 says at Bjorn Odinson it'll be a while. Sedia says, WTH is a finisher in this? Chase M101 says, finisher. Araoki says, Collapsitarian says, are you finisher this rapier with DI gain affliction is pretty much entry level DPS in any raid. Says, tanking person says, chest, boots, amulet, and life staff are all dog water my god. Overheal says, I'd 100% deny you 10 times if you link that to me. Mia Moses says, if you're looking at what to pair it with, a lot of people like Fire Staff, BG, Bow, Musket, and BB. I'm Cleric says, he got this hat though. I'm Zephyr says, change the aquamarine in your life staff to a diamond BTW. MR Clorox Cleaner says, keep the helmet, shocked. Sloth Slug says, just change the whole life staff to be fair. Chase M101 says, this hat for budget heal. Mia Moses says, it's really up to you. Most people that run Fire Staff or Bow with Rapier because of their damage over time.